So this is probably going to be the longest video I've ever made and also the most provocative video I've ever made. So let's have some music.
The open brethren all, the open brethren all, will let just anybody in, treat them like friends of old. If you say you're a Christian, we will not even stall. Just pass along the bread and cup, the open brethren all.
In this video, we are going to be talking about the youth and young people exodus from the Brethren Assemblies, also known as the Plymouth Brethren Assemblies. This is the denomination that I am a part of, that my church is a part of. We would consider ourselves the Open Brethren, just a small subsection of the Plymouth Brethrens. And I spent most of my Christian life in my Brethren Assembly. But at this point in my life, as a 22-year-old young man, I am struggling in my church in a lot of different ways, to the point where I am seriously considering leaving my current church and finding another church. And in this video, I'm going to explain my reasons why. And honestly, I think my personal reasons will be a lot of the reasons why other young people are also considering or have already left the assemblies. So some disclaimers, very crucial ones before we start. Number one, please don't get me wrong or misinterpret my intentions. I believe there is a lot of good in the Brethren Assemblies, and I think most of which are solid churches. And there's probably some assemblies that I would actually thrive in. So please don't see this as a attack piece, and don't see me as holding any resentment towards these churches. I absolutely do not. Number two is that this video is only my perspective, and as one man, a fallible man, I cannot judge a denomination as a whole based on my limited experience just only visiting a few of those across Canada. I can only state what I see. I can only state how I feel, very honestly. So this is not me making a wholesale judgment or description of the assemblies, but it's just a pattern that I see from my limited and fallible perspective, and I'm open to being proven wrong. Number three, why would I make this video instead of just, leaving quietly, keeping this my own business? I'm making this video because I really do love the assemblies. And I think it's a crucial conversation to have if we really thought that this whole phenomena of young people leaving en masse the assemblies to be a really serious problem. If I did not care about the assemblies, I would have left quietly and I wouldn't have bothered anybody and I wouldn't have spoken up because it's not my nature. So again, please don't see this as an attack piece and don't respond to it like it's an attack piece. This is a conversation that I'm opening up. I'm open to feedback so long as they are kind and open-minded. And this really is a serious issue because look, you got a church, and if all your young people are leaving and you're only left with a very small minority, a fraction of what it used to be, then it continues to dwindle and dwindle, and it becomes a really big problem. Okay. Disclaimer number 4 is if you don't know what the Brethren Assemblies are, number one, why are you watching this video? I won't be explaining this. This is an in-house discussion. If you are really curious about it, there's some videos that you can look up. I'll leave one in the description that you can check out. With the disclaimers out of the way, now we can get into the real core issue. The big reason of my departure and of me making this video. The one biggest reason why I am considering leaving my church, my denomination, is everybody like me, everyone else, they did too. Okay, young people have more or less stopped coming through our doors, and the remaining young people really are not sticking around for the most part at all. My closest friends, whom I basically grew up with in my church, they have all left my church, and this is a phenomenon that's happening all over. Young people, they get to a certain age, and then they just leave. They age out. They go to another church. Okay, that's what's happening. So as a 22-year-old young man in the assembly now, where, again, my friends have left me, it is a very lonely place for me on Sunday mornings. It's not that I don't love and appreciate the love and the presence and the wisdom of my older brothers and sisters. And I think, having all age range within the church is very important. Not having someone who I can relate to as a young man, that is not an easy thing to go through, right? There's no one like me at my church, very unfortunately. That makes it super, super lonely. And the fact of the matter is the assemblies are a declining population, right? People don't get any younger. That's just a fact. And the people within the assemblies, they're not getting younger either, right? The population is aging and the population is declining because number one, deaths happen, and number two, people are leaving. Of course, the Lord can do whatever he wants, and he can make whatever miracle or a revival or have people walk through the door. Heck, that's happened to my church before. It has been revived when it was going through a really tough time, and then a bunch of people who just came in. The Lord can do what he wants. But with the way it's going, if the Lord doesn't do anything supernatural, then logically speaking, the assemblies will start dying out. At least in my part of the world where I can see this happening. The old gets much older and eventually they die, and with no young people coming in and the young people in there growing up and leaving, nobody's going to be left to man these churches and keep it thriving. One part of me really wants to stay and help where I can, and I tried that. I really tried that. This past year has been my effort to try to bring that into fruition, but time has revealed that unfortunately this is not sustainable for me, and I cannot handle the loneliness. Of course, I have many other concerns regarding the current state of affairs within the assemblies, but really I'm not interested in going down that road at this time, because to open that can of worms, it seems to be a battle that will be very long and very difficult for me, because I don't like conflict, and some of this will bring about some controversy for sure. And plus, those reasons and those issues, really, that's not why I'm leaving. The biggest reason, and really the only reason, as I reiterate, is because I'm super lonely in these churches. But here's the big kicker, is instead of listing all the reasons or all the things, making this video sort of like a what you're doing wrong or what we could be doing instead kind of video, this is not a video like that. This video is dedicated towards discussing this problem of why young people are leaving the assemblies from my humble perspective and opinion. Okay, I'm just going to list those reasons, maybe a little commentary here and there, but the rest of it, I just wanted to bring these to the table and have us really think about these things. A lot of these are just observations, and I think a big tendency for us is we want to blame somebody, okay? Maybe we really want to put the blame on just the young people. They're being unreasonable, or maybe they're just foolish or whatever. I'm sure this is the sentiment that some people hold, and for part of that, maybe it's true. And for others, they would think, well, it's all the older people who are at fault. They're so close-minded, blah, blah, blah. Again, some of that might be true. Or for some, it's a split. I'm not smart enough to judge all these cases. Again, I just want to bring up my perspective and get the ball rolling and start this conversation, because look, if we don't start taking it seriously, it's going to be too late. Now let's get into the actual reasons. Reason number one is the elephant in the room. There are very few young people at Brethren churches. Like I said earlier, that's the matter of fact. So if there's not a lot of young people there at the current moment, then people would be more reluctant to walk through the doors, because let's face it, young people like to spend time with other young people who are closer to their age for many reasons. Number one, it's just more relatable to spend time with them. And number two, look, everyone's looking for a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and your odds are much better when there's a place where all the single ladies are gathering. Anyways, I digress with that. And really, some people would say this is a shame. Why are we going out to other places just because, there's more young people? That's such a shallow reason. To that I say, what's so wrong with wanting friends and not like being lonely? Okay? And yeah, if you're the only young person at your church, of a marriable state and age, you are out of luck. And with no addition of young people to the assemblies, then the target audience and the crowd, the demographic becomes more and more, older people or people with families, things like that. So the churches have to kind of pivot and cater more and more towards that audience. And look, if that is the target audience of the assemblies, great. You can't really make everybody happy in this world. If that's your target audience, wonderful. Then it's just not for me, and probably it won't be for other young people who are single either. And the longer this goes, the more that brethren identity just becomes churches that are full of old people. And really, when you mention our name to others today, they just think, yeah, full of gray hairs. And really, when you walk into a brethren assembly, that's probably what you're going to see for the most part. Young people want to go where other young people are. And if their friends have left the assemblies and they walk into one, they don't see a lot of young people, then chances are they're going to go somewhere else. That's just very, very natural. Okay, reason number 2 why young people are leaving or feel uncomfortable in the brethren churches is that there's a huge generation gap. Okay, so now let's zoom out for a second to just the whole world, not even within the church, but the whole world. Everywhere, I think there's a massive generation gap between the younger people and the older people. There's a massive difference in values, in worldview, in a lot of stuff. Because here's the reason: different generations grow up differently. It's inevitable that there will be differences. But with the advance of the internet, that gap just got way widened, right? The generation that grew up on the internet and the ones that didn't, they're very, very different. Okay? So the problem then, now we're going back to the brethren assemblies. The problem, I think, is a lack of willingness to understand one another. And in my observation, when there is that lack of willingness to understand, this makes one feel very alienated. And the young people feel quite alienated, I think, within the assemblies. And my sympathies, unfortunately for some, will be with the young people on this one. Number one is because they make up the minority population within the assemblies. And number two, I'm a young person. As young people, and this becomes anecdotal, this becomes my personal experience and some of the experience that I heard from my friends. A common experience is this: they feel like they are being talked at all the time. There seems to be no interest from older folks of actually hearing their, unfiltered and real, honest, genuine opinions or things they want to say, knowing about their actual lives. They only get the odd, hey, how's school going? What are you going to do with that degree? What's your 5-year plan? Or what have you read in your Bible lately? Those kinds of questions. And most of what happens is maybe you talked about those for a bit, you get a few sentences in, and then you end up getting sort of a mini sermon of all the wisdom that they want to impart you. You get a mini sermon on top of the actual sermon on Sunday mornings at the coffee hour. So even when the young person, maybe they speak up or they try to speak up, have a genuine conversation where, everyone talks the equal amount back and forth, they get a few words in and immediately they are interrupted with yet another speech, another mini sermon. I know that older folks mean well when they do this because they know they have wisdom, and I know they have wisdom, good wisdom, that they want to impart to the younger generation, thus making their lives better, right? So that's a really, really good intention. But if you go follow the principle of treating others as you like to be treated, look, if you're a human being, then you want to be heard, right? You want to be listened to and understood and properly loved when they actually know you as a person. So look, if this is something that you want for yourself, then I would give that to the younger person as well. I think give them a little more chance to speak, right? Being quick to listen and slow to speak. And this gets into a territory where I'm telling you what to do. I really don't want to do that because I think that's just something that I don't like to do. Just take it as maybe my humble opinion or my suggestion, okay? Let's keep going with this topic, though. Even when a young person maybe they're honest about a struggle, and they really would like some help, and they want to be heard and understood because they really are struggling, they're going through some pain, and they want to open up, right? They want to open up. They just get another mini sermon. Because there just seems to be such a hurry to kind of fix this problem as soon as possible and give all the right biblical counsel and life experiences. My friends and we call this phenomena the wisdom shotgun, right? The wisdom shotgun is where, again, when someone hears something wrong or they hear a problem, they're in such a big hurry to preach the right answer, to give the right answer as succinctly and as thoroughly and persuasively as possible to fix this problem. They forget that it is a human being on the other side who is having this problem, and a human being needs to be heard and understood. And if you just kind of like a floodgate throw those answers at them, I think that brings more pain and problems than a solution, unless you have someone who's really wise and is just really good at taking counsel and advice. If the older generation doesn't work hard to understand the young people properly, and that would mean trying your best to put yourselves in our shoes, how do you expect the young people to feel comfortable and understood and respected and properly loved within a church, within an assembly? And if you're in a place where you don't feel those things, most people just would not stick around. They would leave. A little side note on this generation gap thing. Sometimes I sense a sentiment from the older generation that they kind of see Gen Z or the younger folks as they're depressed, they're lazy, they're kind of fooled and misguided. A lot of this stuff, some of it is very, very true, right? We are a very troubled generation. Oh, by the way, when they talk about these young people, they say they're lazy, all that. Oh, but the ones that go to our church, the ones that are brethren, oh, they're fine. They're just doing dandy. They're the good ones. Everyone else, again, look, if no effort is made to understand properly why this generation is struggling so much, and look, you can't understand that unless you get a glimpse of what their experience is. That means talking to them and listening to them. If you have not put that effort in to properly understand, then I don't think anyone gets the right to bad mouth them. And that goes both ways. Don't get me wrong. I know the older generation get their unfair fill of disrespect from younger people. A lot of disrespect. Yes, I fully understand. But again, I'm just talking from my perspective. That's another topic for another day. But when young people sense this attitude that they're being looked down upon and they're being honestly stereotyped in this fashion, why would they want to come through our doors? When they come through, they sense this attitude. If there's someone from the outside, they would just go somewhere where they are respected. And for the young people who are within the church, if all they hear is that, well, this generation sucks, they got all this and this and that going for them, and they're struggling with this and that. If that's the picture that we get when we hear you talk about us, man, that feels really, really bad. What hope do we have? Might as well go somewhere else where people see us a little more favorably and with some more hope. Okay, reason number 3 is the hardest for me because it can be very confrontational, but I think it has to be because I think it's a big issue. So reason number 3 is pride and hostility. Pride regarding the way we are, our values, the way we do things. Hostility towards really anything else that threatens that, things that might cause us to change. Reason number 3, I think it's a huge issue and it has many implications. Pride is a huge issue. So in my experience within the Brethren Church, I think we are very, very proud of the way we gather, our values, and especially our adherence to the New Testament pattern of gathering. Like, that's just thrown around everywhere. We love that so much. And in my personal opinion, but this is not the point I'm trying to kind of prove or anything, but I just think this pride goes too far. And I think that sentiment of we're the only ones doing things right when it comes to church gathering, it kind of comes out of this whole pride thing. I don't think that's good. I'm not here to argue theology. I'm not here to argue about whether the way we gather is actually biblical or not. I'm just concerned about this attitude. I think it's a harmful and toxic attitude. As a result of this attitude, we are so dead set on the idea that we are absolutely the best. We're the best. The Assemblies are the best because we're the most biblical. That we start looking down on other churches. And yes, I mean a wholesale idea of if you don't gather the way we do and you do something else, then you're bad. Man, I don't like that attitude. And I don't think anyone would say that sentence I just said explicitly within the Brethren, but really, again, from my limited and finite perspective, I think that attitude is just so obvious. It is everywhere. So another result coming out of this pride is the hostility towards change. Because look, if you're convinced that you have something perfected, all figured out, and this is the divinely ordained way to do it, then we have to do things our way. We got to do exactly what we're doing. Can't have nothing else. Can't have nothing else. Of course, not everything within the Brethren is, things that we find off the page of the Bible, because look, music isn't really talked about, and a lot of different things like meeting times. But again, I see just hostility towards changing any of those things. You just want to keep it doing it. If it ain't broke, don't fix it. That kind of attitude. Yeah, I'm sure some are just so used to doing one thing one way and just not comfortable with change. Look, in that case, I get it. We can work that out. But in any case, this wholesale rejection of changes, I think it might weed out those positive changes too. It's going to throw the baby out with the bathwater. Because I think the truth is, we are not doing everything as good as we could be. And I think everybody within the Brethren would agree with me on that. But change just doesn't seem to be happening on a larger scale anyways. Only very, very small changes. And any of that positive changes that might require some big action, well, they're rejected. What if those changes were crucial? If we're stuck in one era, of doing church, while the world around us, it advances and it adapts to different things of a changing world, then we are bound to lose a lot of our audience. And this isn't about, following the world and being friends of the world and being led astray by the world. I mean, times change and churches have to adapt to that. It's happened throughout history. And if we're stuck in the 1950s, our decoration, our hymns, music, the way we're talking, the values, whatever, if we're stuck in that one era, people from our current era is not going to want to come in because it's just not relevant. And a lot of things that they're dealing with, it won't be addressed when we're stuck in one time and stuck to one way of doing things. And that is evident by the mass youth exodus and the reluctance of youth coming into our church. And it's not that people don't advocate for change. Lots of people advocate for change in the Brethren Assembly. I know a lot of them personally. But unfortunately, I think those voices are either shut down or they're ignored or they're heard and they're acknowledged, but nothing is done about it. Probably not all of this, I don't think not all voices are treated in those three ways, but I know of many who have tried and have simply given up. Another result of this pride is this. There's no room, or there's very, very little room, I feel, for disagreement and dialogue and just getting the conversation rolling and developing these ideas. Once an idea that is considered dangerous is brought up, again, there's such a big hurry to just shut it down as fast as possible. Again, the wisdom shotgun is taken out and it's loaded up and is utilized where all dialogue, potential dialogue, when they are considered inappropriate or dangerous, they're just shut down so fast, so completely. And all you get, again, is a sermon on why our way is better than what everyone else is doing and they're doing it wrong. Just my observation, that's all. Another thing about this attitude is that it causes another attitude towards anyone who is leaving the church. Okay? And the sense I get how people think about those who leave the Brethren is quite discouraging, I think. They're seen as some sort of prodigal that are led away by other churches where there's, oh my gosh, there's paid pastors. Can you believe it? Again, I don't think this will be stated explicitly, and I know it comes from a place of love and concern, but I would argue that I think this might come from a place of ignorance as well. There seems to be just very, very little tolerance for disagreements or new ideas that are maybe a little provocative being brought up. And they get shut down super quickly because they're not following kind of the mainstream way of doing things, you know, within the culture of the Assemblies, within the code of conducts. And within those, you know, people disagreeing, some of them might be, you know, just plain bad, but some of them might be really good changes and they get weeded out. I think we must disagree productively, hear everyone out, and disagree well, debate well, and argue well. So, to tie all together, this pride, I think, is extremely unhealthy. It does not foster, I think, good relationships within the church or with, you know, others that are not us. And so, young people are off to find people who are understanding, more open-minded, willing to listen, humble, and able to disagree well. Reason number 4 has to do with women in the church. Not here to argue about the theology of women in ministry, but I just want to speak up, I think, for some of my younger sisters in Christ in the Brethren Assemblies. We know that the Brethren Assemblies are complementarian, and again, we take big pride in the way we see the role of men and women. So that means women cannot speak in services, cannot be in leadership positions. They're encouraged to wear head coverings. They should be obedient to their husbands. A lot of that stuff, and we take it pretty seriously. But here's the big issue that I see within the churches now is that many young women growing up end up kind of confused about their place at the church and not knowing how they could fit in. So when it comes to issues like this, right, this has some pretty heavy implications in the way a woman lives her life within the Assemblies. So we need to draw kind of, I think, a very clear line for women in the church. What is it that they can do? What is it that they cannot do? And a really clear argument for why we think the Bible says that. And for women who kind of do not fit in the larger identity of a woman in the Brethren church, and that is, you know, one who is helping, maybe they do help out at Sunday school, or they help out in the kitchen, and they're married and they're devoted to their families. But what if someone vastly different comes through the doors? Someone who's not married and doesn't want to be married, or maybe someone who does not want to have children, and someone who's really eager to kind of have a place in ministry. Do we have good answers for someone like that? And do we have a place in the church where their gifts they could be utilized properly? There's only so many spots for serving coffee. There's only so many spots for helping out in the kitchen and helping out with Sunday school. We can't just have it up to those people for them to figure it out, right? We got to be attentive to this. I think this is a real issue. And a lot of young women are growing up today less traditional. And our idea of that conservative traditional woman is not entirely the biblical woman either. Oh man, maybe I spoke too much. Okay, let's go back to to the agenda here. If there's no clear guideline and we just expect everyone to kind of understand what their role is, what they can and can't do, I find that very unreasonable. And I already know there are young women that I know personally in the assemblies who have no sense of direction, how they could serve the Lord reasonably within their church. What am I here for? Why do I have to not do these things, and why do I have to do these things, right? It's a very confusing thing, and I think it's more difficult for them than we expect, because everyone wants a sense of purpose. Everyone wants to belong and do something, and if you only give them such a narrow option and the men get all of this, I think that's a disservice. In my personal opinion, and this is for a separate video, but this is just my personal opinion, I think we fall too much over to the patriarchal side of things, and I think there's room for us to loosen up, because I think the Bible doesn't restrict women the way we do. There we go, I said it. But for now, for the purpose of this video, I just wanted to advocate for some clearer guidelines and just more attention, being more attentive to our ladies. All right, reason number 5 is I think young people are feeling a lack of identity, a lack of vision, and a lack of clarity within the assembly. First of all, let's talk about identity a little bit. This is something that's kind of, I'm kind of on the fence about this, so this is just kind of me stating the fact. The Brethren, I don't think we have too much of a heritage to look back on. We are a relatively new denomination in the grand scheme of things, because Christianity has 2,000 years of history. We are one of those groups who kind of broke off from the main and started doing their own things. Thus, we don't have cool buildings. We don't have a lot of heritage that we can kind of look back on people before us. It's really just stuff from maybe the 1900s or some of the 1800s. That's not a huge issue for me, but I can see why it can be a bit of a disappointment and discouragement to others, because look, there's this young trad thing going on and everyone's becoming Catholic because Catholics have a historic background and they got cool buildings and all of that stuff. Within the church, and this is the second thing we're going to talk about, vision. Within the assemblies, I didn't really feel that strong of a vision as a church collective. Sure, we pride ourselves on following the Bible and preaching the Bible at the pulpit and being really, really biblical. We have lots and lots of conferences and meetings and Bible studies. But what is our vision? What is our grand vision? What difference do we make in this world? What difference do we make in this world for the Lord's kingdom? I'm not saying the things that I mentioned before don't make a difference or aren't important. But what else? What else have we got? What does the Brethren Church actually stand for? What do we do? Is our whole thing, is it just coming to church on Sunday and attending all the meetings and conferences and all of the weekday meetings as well? Is that it? Because really, there's not much to do aside from that on a day-to-day basis. Again, young people, they want to see, I think, some real action they can be a part of. A mission that they could be a part of, because we all want meaning in our lives. And at this stage in life, for a young person, right, looking for that meaning, oh man, it's so important. It's so important. We want a cause that we can stand behind. We're not interested in the Christian social club where we just get together and talk about the Bible and talk about how biblical we are and talk about how to be biblical. I think we want something tangible to take part in. And I think, and that bleeds into the next reason here. Okay, reason number 6, kind of in connection towards the previous reason, is a lack of community involvement. In my time at my church, really, I felt no community involvement whatsoever. And I think that's a shame, because one of the greater, I think, functions of the church is to be, right, to be an appendage of Christ's body to do his work here in this world. And the New Testament church was known for its community involvement, right? It does its charity work, it does its evangelistic work, helping the sick and the widows going out, the apostles going out to preach, to perform miracles. Everyone knew about them, right? People knew that they existed. But I feel like we have become just an exclusive social club for Christians who agree with us. And a lot of the things that we do are mostly in-house, right? The community, if we disappeared one day, if that church building disappeared one day, and it isn't smack dead in the middle of a neighborhood, the neighborhood would not change if the church were to disappear. The neighborhood would absolutely not change. One example of this, totally anecdotal, so take it however you will. One time a brother, he organized a neighborhood outreach, and I thought, that's just a wonderful thing that pardon me, that should be done in more churches, because it's just an outreach to make people realize, hey, we're here, we're a part of your neighborhood, we're a part of your community, so here's us reaching out to you. We're knocking on your doors. And what we did was we knock on doors and ask for donations for the mustard seed, and they can come drop it off, have a cup of coffee, and we get connected with them, right? So I'm really big ups for this brother. I respect him wholeheartedly. Really great that he's doing this. So comes the day of this event, only 2 people showed up to knock on those doors. And that's me and the brother who organized the whole thing. Meanwhile, when our church organized a VBS for kids over the summer, and most of the kids who came are Christian kids who we already know. So when we organized that over the summer and we needed some decorations put up at church, more than a dozen people showed up to help with that. Again, this is totally anecdotal, and this is just kind of my deduction. I could be wrong, but it's easy to come and do something in-house. It's easy to come and just do some decorations. All of these things, just dealing with your own, right? But it's hard to make a community impact, to kind of reach out, to do what the church is called to do. And when young people sense this, and they're at a church where it's like, look, we have lots and lots of meetings, we have lots and lots of conferences, we do this in our own, comfort zone, and that's where the majority of our efforts are kind of located, then I think that turns them off a lot, right? Lots and lots of talk. Lots and lots of talking. Lots and lots of talking about the Great Commission and all of that, but very, very little action, right? The church doesn't do much in the community. And so young people, they go off somewhere else where they can be doing something, right? Where the church is actively involved, maybe with charity work. They're going out, maybe feeding the homeless, helping out in the soup kitchen. Maybe they got a market for people who are less fortunate. Maybe they're street preaching. But young people who actually want to be involved, the people who you want at your church, right, who has on fire for the Lord and wants to do something substantial, well, they go somewhere else where they can do something substantial, where they can take part in this. Well, you say that, okay, if it's such a problem for you where these things are not happening, then why don't we let the young people with the energy take action? And they could start a thing by themselves. How can they if you don't teach them? If they see nobody else doing this stuff at church, they just think, well, I want to start this, but who's going to teach me? Okay, they go somewhere else where someone will teach them, and then they'll go off and do their own substantial thing. Unfortunate for us then. Again, young people want something they can be involved in that makes a tangible difference. If they can't find it with us, they'll go find it somewhere else. It's so easy to stick to our own, but when a church loses its presence in the community, we miss a very, very clear function of the church. Reason number 7, and this is kind of this issue doesn't just affect young people, it affects everybody. It's a lack of manpower and infrastructure within the church and within all the ministries that the church takes part in. So this kind of connects to what we just talked about. Is, look, maybe the reason why there's no community involvement or any substantial things happening that will leave our footmark here in this world, maybe there's just no energy for anyone to start something like that or do something substantial and meaningful. So everyone just stays in their comfort zone with their weekly meetings because that's all the energy they have. What do I mean by this? Well, in the Brethren Church, we do not have paid ministry staff, or at least very, very little. Only as, missionaries and speakers, they get paid. But the elders, deacons, people running ministries within the local assembly, nobody gets a cent. We actually hate that idea of pastors being paid full-time wages because we think that makes people go into ministry just for the money. And then the money is only going to the pastor, is paying for his salary, and then no money goes towards missions or stuff like that. Well, okay, you know what? Everyone who is in ministry then in the Brethren Church, they have to juggle their actual jobs. Because if you just do ministry full time and you don't get paid, how are you going to put food on the table and feed your wife and kids? If you're an elder, sorry, you also have to go do your 9 to 5, plumbing job or something. The 9 to 5 has to happen. But the 9 to 5 happens and the rest of the effort, pardon me, the rest of the effort, kind of the leftovers, then that's given to the church. Again, I'm not saying everyone does that, but it's a very real possibility, is it not? Do you see how this can seriously limit the amount of things that a church can accomplish? When the people who are there, who actually have the heart and the ability to accomplish those things, but they have to focus on feeding their family first, so the church kind of suffers because of that. In other churches, there's full-time staff who can use all their attention on investing in the church and bettering the church. Now, am I saying they're all doing that? Absolutely not. But at least the option is there. Then you can have people who really put their full attention into planning maybe a youth group event or an outreach or things like that. Meanwhile, at our churches, everyone's so busy with their lives and juggling that with their church lives. We have so much on our plate already that we can't really accomplish much on top of that. And additionally, since we're not a huge fan of this denomination idea, then, to be fair, the whole thing of denomination is a thing. It's not without its problems, but it's not without its merits either. Denominations, a lot of them are able to have structure, right? Denominations can kind of take care of a lot of things for the local churches and give them resources and all of that stuff. They have infrastructure and all of that. We don't. We don't have a network. We don't have a headquarters. We don't have anything like that. We just have independent, really, churches kind of running their own thing, but we all fall under one umbrella, and sometimes we have meetings together. That means no resources. I mean, for the most part, for ministry leaders, no financial resources, no backup, and no information when someone wants to do something. Everyone has to just kind of figure it out on their own. And they just got to get lucky with that. And I think this affects the congregation on a very practical level. And again, young people are off somewhere else where they know that actually there's something, kind of powering these ministries aside from the Holy Spirit, that they can do something substantial and they know they'll be able to get help with it. And they know that there's a guy that they can look up to who knows what he's doing when it comes to these big things, because look, he's paid and he's able to do these things wholeheartedly. Just my observation. Number 8 is a lack of education in ministry. This might be a little bit on the fence, but let's talk about it. So although the gifts of the Spirit, right, the gifts of the Holy Spirit, everyone's got one of those or multiple, even though they are definitely apparent and they exist in the Brethren Assemblies, because surprise, surprise, we are Christians and we have the Holy Spirit. There is really no formal training for ministry leaders for the most part. We got the Emmaus courses, and those are pretty great. But really, aside from that, there's not a lot of formal training that is available to us. This is a tricky one for me because kind of this idea of being trained, or even the idea of like getting education that's necessary for ministry, I'm still on the fence about that. However, when we don't have those things, there's definitely a few things that are negatively affected. First of all, pastoral training. That's such an important thing, right? You need pastoral training in order to minister people spiritually. So my hypothesis is within the assemblies, maybe people feel like they're not properly cared for by their spiritual leaders because those leaders are not properly trained to minister towards spiritual needs, to take on a pastoral role. When all they get kind of advice from personal experience and wisdom, and of course biblical advice, I don't discredit our elders. I think they do a great job, but I can definitely see this as a problem where no formal training is given, where in that area formal training is really, really important, especially as a pastor. Look, you have to deal with a lot of stuff as a pastor, and sometimes that stuff gets pretty hairy. So I think getting some training on that is super, super important. Secondly, there's the theological side of things. Theological training. Most within the assemblies would complain that seminaries and Bible colleges, they're just not doing a good job anymore. They become liberal, they don't teach the proper interpretation, whatever. So who does then? Who is going to give the proper training? Is it going to be a layman who reads a few books, or maybe a lot of books, and they read the English Bible a lot? Is that going to be the one who gives all of the training? Because look, there is so much more towards theological education for someone who is going to teach and preach. In the assemblies, it is the men of the church who take turns giving sermons every Sunday. And interestingly enough, one writer who also kind of talked about this issue within the assemblies, I will link him below, he calls this the preacherhood of all believers. We have the priesthood of all believers, but do we have the preacherhood of all believers? So when you have all these guys taking turns, guys who are willing, taking turns, taking the pulpit every Sunday, what inevitably happens is that sometimes maybe an ungifted man will be put at the pulpit who is not gifted at preaching, and they're doing a ministry where the Holy Spirit did not give them a gift for. Who is the one who suffers as a result of that? It is the congregation who is not being fed properly by someone who is gifted to do so. This is not even about education at this point. This is about training. Okay? So I think number one, someone who's gifted, and number two, someone who's undergone training will be better suited for a lot of these tasks. And those training, that stuff is just not available within the assemblies, for the most part anyways. When you want training in the assemblies, you get training from what I would call laymen. Not that laymen cannot be gifted spiritually, but it's just people who did these things at a layman capacity when much more could be offered elsewhere. If you want some of that solid discipleship for you to go off and do some really, really practical things, or maybe really, really technical things within ministry, you might be out of luck when it comes to being in a Brethren assembly. And you might get better training in a Bible college. There, I said it. Again, I'm on the fence about this one because I see a lot of problems with the idea of you have to get trained and full-time staff and all of that stuff. And there's some benefits of the Brethren model for sure, is that give all men a chance to preach, and they definitely will grow spiritually. So I'll just stop here. I already laid all the points I have on the table. I'd like us to consider these things. Reason number 9 is I think young people are feeling like the Brethren assemblies are out of touch with the world. I sense a huge lack of awareness of the world around us. And when current events or things of this world or people that are outside the church are addressed, largely I see a straw man. I really do see a straw man with a lot of generalizing assumptions and descriptions. There's no nuance to these discussions. And another thing that I see is that there might be a fear that I sense of the world around us, in the sense of the fear of losing us young people to the world. One example would be there's this kind of this idea that young people going off to college and they're teaching evolution, therefore colleges are all extremely very very bad, evil, and any person who goes to a public school or goes to college are going to be led astray by evolution. The world is portrayed in a very simplistic fashion, and some of the arguments that come from the world are kind of reduced to a very easily addressable size, and then they are easily dismissed. Again, using a straw man. So, and the big problem with this is a very, very big problem, is that when you see the world as kind of less or a more simplistic, a reduced version of what it actually is and what it actually offers, younger generations who eventually does make contact with the world, because all of us has to go out in the world at one point, we can't just stay sheltered at church forever. They get the full effects, and they see all of these different views at their full force, and they think that is not what I was taught at church. I was told that evolution is one day a monkey decided to walk and become a man. Maybe I'm making kind of a straw man too here, but here's my argument, is that when the young person sees the full force and the full argument made by the world, they realize that what their church taught before, well, it was just a straw man. And this leads them to think that their church had no idea what they were actually talking about. And that loses credibility for us. I used the evolution example before, but here's just one example, or a possible scenario, is that a young person at church in Sunday school is taught a very simple version of evolution, and then they go to college and see all of the scholarly work, archaeological work, and all of that actually went into studying evolution. And they are like, well, my church just had no idea what they were talking about. And now my faith is extremely challenged. And some even end up leaving the faith for that. And that's terrible. What we need to do, I think, is to be aware of what the world or the other side is actually saying when we address the world or even other Christians. And we need to steel man those arguments. What it means is just, we take the best argument they have to offer, and then we give our best answers to that. We don't take the easy way out. We actually address them properly. We must take this seriously, and we must help our audience, right, our young people, to address all the false messages that they are getting. And many of these false messages, very, very well formulated. We can't coddle the young people forever and kind of shield and hide them from all of that information. At some point, we have to allow them access. And instead of simply sheltering them, I think we guide them through this minefield of misinformation, and we try our best to get them well informed, but also staying on the truth. And this is going to be a hard thing to do, but it's the right thing to do. So are you willing to do the right thing the difficult way? Reason number 10 is doctrinal disagreements, as well as maybe intellectual issues. So fact of the matter is, this is just a fact. I'm not here to argue about right and wrong, but some people just leave because of doctrinal disagreements. I've seen many of those people, and some example are people are not a huge fan of, dispensationalism anymore, or pre-tribulational rapture, or maybe people have a problem with the theology of how women are supposed to be, viewed in the church, right? These kinds of issues, people disagree and then they leave. That's just what happens. Some of the young people have left because of that. I think our response to this, though, that's the bulk of the problem. Number one, in response, I think there needs to be more work done on our theology, or at least as a young person, I feel like there's kind of a lack. Right now, it's difficult to find anything accessible or substantial or even up to date, kind of arguing why we're right, why we believe the things we believe, why we do the things we do. I only know of some really old books that we refer to get back at this. Of course, we have the Bible, but the Bible is hard to interpret sometimes. The reason why the modern Reformed movement has so much steam behind it and it kind of exploded in popularity is because they wrote books like crazy. They wrote lots and lots of books. They're very intellectual, right? They did lots of intellectual exercises and they wrote lots of books. So they got respect that way. And so did the actual reformers during the Reformation. They wrote like crazy. They had lots and lots of books. So it seems like we're lacking a little bit here in the kind of informational and intellectual front, or even just having a central website for the Brethrens and giving out very clearly, who we are, our identity, our history, and the reason why we do things the way we do, or even what we do in the first place and what we believe, because lo and behold, that's actually kind of hard to find if you're new to the movement. I know we have some awesome teachers and preachers who are very, very knowledgeable and they can give you a pretty good answer about all things Brethren, but those guys travel around and speak. And, you don't have access to them all the time. And they just travel around and speak. I think we need more of an intellectual presence. We need some substantive work that we can look at when we have a theological issue. We can't just go ask the elders on a Sunday morning. And yeah, I think I'm done with that. Let's get to the next topic. Kind of related to this topic is when it comes to the intellectual sides of things, so maybe some tough questions, some more complex problems and subjects, I find that when I want to kind of learn more about those things, I don't go to church and ask my elders. I don't go to church and ask a smart person. I don't even ask, some of the leaders or the preachers within our denomination. I have a better chance of getting a satisfactory answer online than in the church itself. And I think this whole intellectual side is not a priority in the assemblies. And on top of that, I sense an anti-intellectual attitude within the assemblies where anything intellectual gets brought up, and by that I mean academic stuff, things that kind of go outside of the Bible, then it gets frowned upon. Everyone kind of just goes with the stock answers that are good enough for some, but no one seems to be aware of a lot of the nuances and discussions and the difficulties of these tougher issues. They just don't seem to be aware of it, because it seems like that the easy answer is good enough for them. I think that is a big problem, because some of these issues that get brought up are actually issues that make a huge difference in people's lives and how they live their lives, even to their identities. Apologetics, let's talk about that for a second. I think that the art of apologetics within the assemblies is largely ignored. Or when you ask a apologetics related question, they are given the super stock answer that every Christian gives, and that's just not good enough for some people. And those people who like to ask some deeper questions, they sense that, well, I'm not going to get a good answer here, so let me go somewhere else. Unfortunate stuff. And then when it comes to issues like the gender identity stuff, relationship stuff, or being a woman in a church, in ministry, these things, they have to do deeply with a person's identity. Those things are not to be brushed off and kind of ignored or just given really easy answers. But I think for those things in the assemblies, again, there is no nuanced discussion at all, and they're just brushed off with a really easy stock answer. And when deeper study is mentioned, or at least when somebody starts asking a lot of questions, shunning comes out a little bit. And a secret fear of people straying from the right path is kind of brought up when someone again starts asking different questions, or they start looking to different sources for solutions because they're trying to understand this as best as possible. the fear comes out, and then the wisdom shotgun is brought out again, pew, and it's the wisdom shotgun is given to those who answer too much, or they come to an unfavorable conclusion. Why? Because again, we're in such a hurry to just kind of push down any other opinions that is not the right one. We're not even interested in discussing it. Even if we catch wind of it, we bring out the wisdom shotgun and we just give them we just try to give that right answer. Man, I don't think that's good. I really don't think that's good. I think that ends up pushing people away, and that doesn't solve their problems. That just kind of closes them off. Everyone seems to be just so settled on everything. No one asks any questions. And those who do, they end up leaving because they can't seem to find a satisfying answer. Reason number 11 is a short one. I think it's too confusing for newcomers. I'm at the point where I'm not comfortable with inviting someone to my church because it's just, number one, look, it's really boring, okay? It's really, really boring for someone who is a newcomer and doesn't understand what is going on, especially during the breaking of bread meeting. And second of all, the services are really just too confusing for newcomers. Again, especially the breaking of bread service. A lot of our rules for the New Testament gatherings, right? People are largely unaware of those. And when they walk it for the first time, it may just be too weird. It might just be too weird. It's not something that I want to bring someone new in faith into. Reason 12 is the services are simply unengaging. And, this one could go both ways, but let's talk about it. The breaking of bread service, oh man, it could be really, really encouraging because there's some services where it's undeniable that the Spirit is moving, where several people are thinking about the exact same thing one morning. Even when we get some of those, for the most part, I still find it very unengaging to sit at a breaking of bread service. And I personally find that it's kind of hard to get a lot out of it. At this point, a lot of people would just say that my heart's not in the right place. You know what? I'll just sit here and take it. But at the breaking of bread service, it is, at least in my experience, it is the same few people who stand up every single Sunday to share a message, to share a word. And then we take communion, which I find to be extremely important. So I'm happy that I get to take it every week. But the rest of the meeting is just a hymn sing. And you get lucky if you get instruments, depending on which particular church you come from. Yeah, so I found it to be pretty uninspiring. In most cases, the worship in the Brethren Assemblies are very, I think, subpar. And I feel to be quite lifeless. And then you follow up that worship service that you already found to be kind of meh. And then you follow that up with more hymn singing. And, and the hymns we sing at the breaking of bread and the second service, those hymns, those are designed for people who actually know how to sing. Most of the time, I can't even hit the notes. And so most of the time, it doesn't sound very good because, look, it's designed for a 4-part harmony. And nobody knows how to sing 4-part harmony. That's just a little side note. We talked about the worship, compare the worship, compare that with other churches. It's just, the competition is not there. It's not even a competition. It's just a stomp. We're not very good at making music. That's just all I'm going to say. When it comes to, kind of like the vibe, oh man, maybe that's too hip of a word, but just the feeling you get when you enter the church building, right? The interior decoration is oftentimes very, very outdated, right? And again, I feel like it's very visually unengaging. That's why a lot of people like cathedrals so much, is because it's very visually engaging. You got pictures to look at, and the whole thing is designed so that your eye is guided, right? So Yeah, I find that to be something that kind of makes me a little bit sad, but it's not a deal breaker. It's just one of the reasons, right? Um, so when it comes to all of these things like worship, singing, how we decorate our interior or how we do our construction and stuff like that. So many would say that, those are not the important things, right? These are just secondary. If those things are making you not get a lot out of church and it's probably your problem, then I would say part of that is true. But if we are doing everything for the Lord, if we actually, whether we eat or drink, whatever we're doing, do it for God, then wouldn't that kind of bleed into our events and our worship and the way we treat our interior space? If the sense I'm getting is that those things are done half-heartedly and half-baked, shouldn't we be giving our absolute best to the Lord in these things? Just something to think about. Look, if people who are going to the assemblies are satisfied with the way things are, and they're okay with the way we sing, they're okay with the way it looks inside, then absolutely fine. For those who are not satisfied, they're not going to sit there and take it. They're just going to go find greener pastures. Look, if a part of your congregation leaves due to not being engaged at your meetings, at your messages, at your worship, I really hope the first instinct you feel when you hear that is not to just write it off as them not having their priorities straight. I'd rather us have the instinct that, oh man, what could we be doing better? I think that attitude is more helpful for everybody. If there is a biblical church that is also, engaging in all aspects and more suitable for us young people, can you blame us for switching? Again, just a question. The bonus reason that I'm adding, because my friend reminded me of this, very important, even though this doesn't affect myself too much, this affects many others, so I'm going to speak up for them. There's, I think, a general lack of community support and mental health awareness within the Brethren for young people in particular. I think there's great community support for people who kind of fit into the wider population, but young people are very different. As I mentioned earlier, there's that generation gap, and I think because of that, young people find it really hard to kind of plug themselves into a Brethren community and feel like they belong there organically. And they're having trouble being comfortable with being vulnerable and being honest and sharing their genuine issues. And I think there's a lack of belief that they're actually going to get any real help when they reach out to this community. There's no support, or at least they believe that they're not going to get the kind of support they need. A large part of this is, I just think, it's that wisdom shotgun thing that I mentioned earlier, is where somebody brings out a problem, an issue, a struggle that they're having, and then immediately the response they get is, they're given a wholesale kind of solution and answer, mostly based on personal experience. It's like, oh, if this worked for me when I was younger, when I was having your issue, then this must work for everybody else who's having this issue. Or they give you a biblical answer. It's like, where my interpretation of this passage says that this must work for this, this, and that, therefore it must work for every single person. Again, I think this wholesale approach is really not helpful, and this ends up pushing people away, because it's kind of like you're not taking the time to understand them. And young people just feel like, well, this is just not my crowd anymore. It's just so different from who I am. So I'm going to go find other people who would take the time to understand me, to actually listen to me, and then try their best to give me what I need. You see what I'm saying here? And then the mental health awareness problem is, mental health is such a delicate thing, and it requires such a delicate approach, and it's going to be different for every single person. And then sometimes the problem is really, really personal. And again, you can't just give a wholesale approach to every single person. That does more harm than good. But unfortunately, I think that this whole idea of mental health issues within the Brethren is just not really It's not really talked about, and it's largely ignored, and sometimes it's even frowned upon as like psychology is evil, that kind of stuff. Again, this is a tough balance, but I think more work needs to be done about that, because this current generation is one that either they are really struggling more with mental health, or they're just more vocal about it than the previous generations. Either way, if all the advice they're getting is to pray and read your Bible more when they're seriously struggling with depression and things like that, then they're going to go somewhere else where people know what they're talking about. And that's just a very, very unfortunate thing. Okay, now we have reached the final reason. Is maybe young people, or at least maybe a fraction of them, they are indeed leaving because they're going to leave the faith altogether anyways. Maybe they are leaving for superficial reasons, and they just want to be in a social club with other young people. They just want to be entertained during services. Maybe they don't want to hear from the Bible anymore, and they don't want the pressure of obeying the Bible anymore, and they don't want to be around people who would encourage them to do that. Maybe they are leaving truly for wrong reasons. I fully admit that some are exactly like that, and I lament that fact. But still, that's only a fraction. It's not 100%. Some fault will always lie with us. There's always things we could change. So at the end of this video, I invite you to reflect alongside me and really consider the future of the Assemblies, and really consider how we could be better serving our young people who are probably suffering to some degree and confused and really, really need help. And if they can't get that at the Assemblies, they would go somewhere else. So at our conclusion of this video, I'm anticipating one response that I would get. And the response goes like this. Among many other responses, of course, but this is the one that the response will be like this. Perhaps we don't do things perfectly, but at least we prioritize scripture. At least we're following scripture, and we're doing it in how we gather and worship. We have the best church practices. We have the best theology. It's going to be a net loss for everybody who leaves for secondary reasons. To that, this is a very, very hard thing for me to say. With all due respect, at the very least, I am no longer convinced that that statement is true. I am not entirely convinced anymore that the Brethren churches are as biblical as they say they are, or as I once thought they were. And I fear a form of legalism that is hiding in plain sight right now within the Brethren Assemblies. I have not looked into every single issue. I have not looked into every single argument for each. I right now am coming from a place of uncertainty, not from a place of rejection. I am not saying that I am fully convinced that this is not biblical, that's not biblical, and this is not biblical, and here's why. But I'm at the point where it's like, I don't know anymore. I am unconvinced that we're doing things the best we can. There's just way more to these issues than I have ever anticipated. And of course, as mentioned before, there's lots and lots of problems, in my opinion, lurking beneath the surface for a lot of the churches that are smaller and more conservative. And the Brethren Assemblies fall right dead center in that demographic. I will be honest with you on that. I think there's really a lot of deadly issues just lurking below the surfaces, and the way they show their ugly faces is going to be a big problem for us. But here's the reason why I'm not talking about it now. Two reasons. Reason number one is because I haven't formulated all my thoughts on those yet. And I think that's going to be a really big battle with lots of work to be done. And number two, those problems are not why I am leaving. I am leaving because I'm lonely. I am leaving because there's no young people. That is my biggest reason. And the young people leave for various reasons. I just don't consider this a battle that I can fight right now. It's going to be too tiring. I'm already struggling too much. I'm not ready to fight on this hill. And I truly have tried over the past couple years already. I've tried to make things better, but number one, I'm just a man. And number two, I got too weary and it's not sustainable for me. So I thought the best course of action for myself is to look for somewhere where I can actually be sustained and grow. But the reason why I made this particular video, to reiterate, in the first place, is because I really do love the Assemblies, and I think the biggest problem facing them right now is the departure of young people. I'm tremendously thankful that I got to grow up in my church, in an open brethren assembly, and the values they instilled in me, like fearing the Lord, loving his word, and following his word as best as I can, and understanding what his word means, and the opportunities they gave me to serve, to speak at the pulpit, those helped my spiritual growth tremendously. I would hate to see the brethren churches fade away with time, but with the way things are going right now, that's just going to happen. And I hate to think about that. If I did want to see them fade away, I would simply not speak up at all. So now I speak up for our young people, for people who feel exactly like me, for people who are struggling, without whom there is no future for the churches. So please, I invite you to truly consider these things. Take what I say just as what they are. Don't come into this, with an attitude of being defensive. It's a conversation, right? I'm bringing up my ideas to you. I'm bringing up my perspective to you. You evaluate them as honest as you can. And let's see if we can figure something out. And maybe this will inspire some people to make some changes. Because I think the young people in our churches, they deserve more effort from everyone else. It's a tough time. It's a tough time to be growing up as a young Christian. And if we're not offering a place where they could be helped, they could feel at home, they could feel like they prosper, then they're going to go find somewhere else. That's just the fact of the matter. So please, I'm open to your feedback. Again, I'm only one fallible man, and I think probably some of these things that I said will be false and wrong. And I invite you to point those out, so long as you're respectful and open-minded. Share your perspective if you like. If you have a different perspective or you have a similar perspective as mine, please don't be shy to share those. Again, be respectful, be understanding. I'll try to put myself in your shoes if you try your best to put yourself in my shoes. Anyways, that's the end of this video. I'm not sure what my future regarding churches will be. I'm sure we'll figure that out in a few months' time. Until then, God bless, and I'll see you in the next video. Thanks for listening.
The open brethren all, the open brethren all, will let just anybody in, treat them like friends of old. If you say you're a Christian, we will not even stall. Just pass along the bread and cup, the open brethren all. We know which meeting matters, it's the breaking of bread. If you don't make it there each week, we'll almost have your head. And though it isn't truly of your salvation proof, if women can't cover their heads, we might go through the roof. We are all independent, but we all look the same. It would be such a shock to not have chapel in the name. And we don't have a dress code, not technically, you see, as long as guys have collars and we can't see girls' knees. The open brethren all, the open brethren all, will let just anybody in, treat them like friends of old. If you say you're a Christian, we will not even stall. Just pass along the bread and cup, the open brethren all. We don't have just one version, but we're slightly confused, as some of us use KJV and others versions new. And schedule's not everything, oh we can surely see God can say anything he wants from 9 to 12:03. And we are not political, We never take a stance unless you are a liberal, then you won't stand a chance. We may ask you to do things and you may wonder why. We'll use our patterns and principles to teach you to comply. The open brethren all, the open brethren all, will let just anybody in, treat them like friends of old. If you say you're a Christian, we will not even stall. Just pass along the bread and cup, the open brethren all. We use instrumentation at some of our meetings, but it can't be percussion or something other than strings. And we'll stick to our hymn book until the day we die. But when we're driving home, we listen to 105.9. The open brethren all, the open brethren all, will let just anybody in, treat them like friends of old. If you say you're a Christian, we will not even stall. Just pass along the bread and cup, the open brethren all. Just pass along the bread and cup, the open